Oh, we're live.
There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to session number 7. It's probably going to be a quick one today. We've got only one, or actually a couple of questions. They're very specific. So what we're going to be doing is going over these questions, these programming questions that one of the students posted, and giving how we would approach these programming problems. So, Phil, you want to take it away?
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen here. Nope, wrong. Here, share. No, okay, hold on, we're there. I think this is working.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the first question. This looks like a sort of a typical first year computer science program problem. It says to write a Java program to calculate the total weekly salary of employees of a small company. The program should be as per the description below. So my strategy is always start first by reading the instructions a couple of times to see if I can understand what the problem is asking for. So I see 4 steps here. Allow the user to enter the number of employees in the company. For each employee, allow the user to enter the employee's name and the number of days work during the week. Based on the number of days worked by this employee, allow the user to enter the daily amount received for each day, and then calculate and display the total amount, and repeat the same for each employee. So we enter the number of employees. For each employee, we get that employee's name, the number of days worked during the week. Based on the number of days worked, we enter the daily amount for each day, and then calculate and display the total for this employee. So right now, the first thing I'm thinking is I want to identify the inputs and the outputs in here. So I'm just going to grab a highlighter. Do I have a highlighter? Yeah, I do. And I'm going to try to highlight the inputs to the program. Allow the user to enter the number of employees. For each employee, allow the user to enter the employee's name and number of days worked. Based on the number of days worked by this employee, allow the user to enter the daily amount received, and then calculate and display the total amount and repeat. So I've got 1, 2, 3. I see 4 inputs here. And then I'm going to look for the outputs. I'll use a different color. And the only thing I see that we're outputting is the total amount for each employee. So those are my inputs and my outputs. The next thing I'm thinking about doing is figuring out how do I get from the inputs to the outputs. But I see down here that they have an example of what the output should possibly look like. So I just want to look through this and see if this matches my understanding of the problem described above. So how many employees do you have? That's that first input. How many days work during the week? This seems to be out of order with what's specified up here. So for each employee, allow the user to enter the employee's name. That's happening down here, but the number of days work is happening up here. So there seems to be some confusion in the description of this problem between what's being asked up here and what's being shown as an example down below. So if this were an assignment by an instructor or in a class, I would ask for clarification on this. Which of these am I supposed to actually be tackling here? So since I don't have access to that, I'm going to have to make an assumption. And I'm going to go ahead and go with the output and say that the output is the behavior that we should be aiming for. So in that case, I'm going to recapture these inputs. So here's how many employees. Here's how many days. Here's the name of the employee. Here's the daily amount. And then that name and daily amount is repeated for each employee, and the total amount is outputted for each employee. Okay. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea based on the vague description above and the details below of what's being asked. So at this point, I would start to sketch an outline, just a rough outline of the major steps that will need to occur in the program in order to solve this problem. So the first thing that's going to need to happen, I think, is we need to get the number of employees. And then, according to this down here, the next thing we would need to get is the number of days worked. And then I need to do something for each of the employees. So I'm going to need some sort of a looping structure. And I just want to sketch out the broad strokes here. And I'm going to say something like, you know, for each employee, I'm going to get that employee's name. And then I'm going to get the daily amount. And then I can calculate the total amount. And then I can display the total amount. And I'll do that for each employee, and that should finish the program. So this is my rough outline of how I would intend to go about solving this in a Java program, for example. And then my next step would be to take each of these steps and break it down and refine it a little bit. So this is going to be, you know, display a prompt asking for how many employees do you have, and then storing a value in a variable using a scanner. And then this is going to be the same thing, but asking for the number of days worked. This loop might be a while loop. Maybe I count the number of employees. So while the number of employees is greater than 0, get an employee name, get the daily amount, calculate the total, display the total, and subtract 1 from the employee count. So I would just continue to refine these steps of this outline until I feel confident that I can code each of those steps in Java without too much trouble.
Yeah.
And that's the point at which I would start implementing this in Java.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. So there's only a little bit more detail here that you would really need to add to make it really code.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would probably personally, I would stop my outline here and I would start turning this into code. When I do this, I usually take these, put them in my program file and give them comment marks, and then just structure the rest of my program around it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you could just turn this into comments, put this in your source code in your editor, and then for each of these comments, you could just write the Java instructions after it to do that thing. Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Cool. Awesome. So I'll do the second one that we've got here. So for the second one, we've got, the question is, an electric power distribution company charges its domestic consumers as follows. And we've got to rate a table of consumption units, and we've got a table of rates of charge here, right? So if they use, this must be like 200 kilowatts or something like that. If they use less than 200 kilowatts, it's 50 real per kilowatt. If it's between 201 and 400, then it's 0.65 real per kilowatt plus a base of 200, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 600 and above, right? And they want a Java program that accepts the power consumed by a consumer and then calculate the total amount that that consumer should pay. And here's some sample output here at this one. So they ask for consumer ID, customer name, the number of units consumed, and then they have the total bill here, right? So I'm going to follow Phil's pattern here, and it looks like most of it is defined in this sample output. So I'll go straight there, and we were using pink for inputs, right? So the inputs starts with the customer ID, so that's going to be that one. Then the customer name, then the number of units consumed, and then once we have all this information, the units consumed is used to calculate the total rate, and then the total bill is spit out here. So our output is just this total bill DLE, right? Okay, so I'm going to, we'll start outlining these things. So we start with the, oh yeah, let's turn this off. So we, there we go. So we start with the inputs. Oh. Everything here, right? So first thing is to get the customer ID. That takes care of that one. Then get customer name. And get units consumed. And then some processing. So processing happens. And I'm going to output the total bill. Right, so this is my, we're following the input processing output thing here, and I just have some kind of a placeholder for the actual processing. I'm going to kind of back into it based on what the total bill is and what's going on in these things, right? So the ID and name don't seem to be used except for display in this case, and it's not even actually displayed in any of the outputs. We just ask for it and then we don't do anything with it. So I'm gonna ignore those, but the units consumed and what we end up being charged is what kind of happens in between these two things, right? So I need to process my total bill here, and what this looks like I need to do is a decision structure of some kind, because that however many units are consumed, if it's less than 200, then my rate is going to be this. If it's between 201 and 400, then my rate is going to be this, and I've got a base charge of some kind here. So I've got two numbers that relate my total calculation, right? So my total bill is the rate multiplied by consumption plus the extra charge, right? So now I just need to figure out, this is what my total bill is, right? And now I just need to figure out what my rate is and what my extra charge is, right? So this is the what comes before this. So I'm working from the bottom up, so to speak, in this case, from output in. And then so the way I would do this is something like if consumption less than 200, and rate is equal to 0.5, and extra is 0. Shorten this. if consumption is between 201 and 400, rate is 0.65, extra is 200, and then something similar. 401, 600, and that's 8, 400, and finally, if consumption is over 600, then rate is 1, and extra is, what do we say it was, 500. So that's my fairly detailed outline of the program, right? And I feel like this is almost directly one step away from code. I didn't take an intermediate step really in here, but it's pretty close at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, we've got a comment. James says that in Quebec, you get the more you use, the less it costs, and I think that makes sense for most people. This is how the problem was posed to us in the discussion board. So thanks for that, James. I think that's how it works here in Phoenix as well. Do you guys, if you have any more questions, post them to the discussion board real quick. We'll give or not discussion board, the live chat real quick, and we'll give you a count of 30 to see if anything pops up. Other than that, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for our last live session of the semester. This will be the live session the same week as the final exam. So if you have questions about the final exam or any of the content that it covers, there's a study guide posted in the course that will give you an idea of what you should be filling out and stuff like that. And that'll be our last discussion of the semester. So we'll cover some of the final exam questions you might have, even though it'll be open by then, and just any open-ended sort of questions you might have about computer science or where to go next after the class, stuff like that. We super appreciate all the hard work you guys are putting into completing the projects and how much you're helping each other out. We can't emphasize that enough. I know we say it every time we have one of these things, but it's fantastic to see the level of activity and the community that you guys have developed out in the discussion boards. So
cool.
Awesome. Nothing else. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
You're on fire.